Welcome to the Be Well podcast. Here we share real stories, have honest conversations, and offer practical wisdom to help moms dealing with postpartum, birth, pregnancy, and beyond. I'm your host, Candace Jackson. I am a birth and postpartum doula, childbirth educator, wife, and mama to two. Today we have Mallorie with us. I'm so excited to have Mallorie, Dr. Mallorie, with us today. Okay, put some emphasis on the doctor. Okay, so I'm so excited to have you here, Mallorie. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do? How many children do you have? All the info on you.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Mallorie, or Dr. Mallorie as well. I am a wife, a mother of one son. I just had him recently back in January. I'm also a pharmacist. I just graduated in May. Entrepreneur, and I was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, and but I currently reside in the Metro Detroit area.
Oh, right. Girl, you do a whole bunch. Now, how you got time to do everything that you got going on? Like, you are a busy lady.
Yes, I am, and that's part of the reason why I'm here trying to talk about my experience because I was very busy during my pregnancy and postpartum journey.
All right. So well, when you told me a little bit about your birth story, you
Mhm.
said that you were pregnant. You found out you were
Yeah,
pregnant when you were in pharmacy school.
yeah,
That just sounds like a lot because pregnancy anyway is a lot. Then put in
yes.
pharmacy school on top of that. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Yes. So me and my husband found out that we were pregnant um, going into my last year of pharmacy school. And I was very nervous because, of course, when you're in a doctoral program, they don't curate it to, you know, to cater to families or,
Right.
expectant mothers. And it's not very many women in pharmacy school who get pregnant. So I was very worried about what my journey will look like and what my last year will look like. Would I have to put a halt on school? Could I continue? So that was a very stressful time for me, um trying to navigate that.
Okay. Were there any other people there, women that were pregnant during the time that was in the program at the time you were?
Not that I know of. No. I
Okay.
do know that there have been those women before me, but they had already graduated, but they were pregnant in school. But at the time that I was currently in school, I did not know anyone. I was the only one.
All right. So where did you go to school at? And did you have any family located close to you during that time? I know you said you're married, so I'm assuming your husband was there during that time. Talk about the support that you had while you were in pharmacy school pregnant.
So I went to pharmacy school at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And just like I said, I am originally born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. All of my family resides in Georgia. I have no family anywhere else. And so in Washington, D.C., I was completely alone. I actually got married while I was in pharmacy school as well. So when I first started off there, I did not have anyone. But then once I got married, I did have my husband relocated to Washington, D.C., and we moved together. Um, when I was pregnant, he was back and forth from Detroit to Washington, D.C., because his job's home base is in Detroit.
Okay.
So he was there, but he was back and forth. So anytime I had like a doctor's appointment, he would try his best to get back to DC some type of way. Or if I had an emergency, which I did have a few emergencies throughout my pregnancy. And so really, he was my only support system other than my colleagues. A lot of my colleagues were very supportive throughout my pregnancy. My professors, some of them were very supportive throughout my pregnancy. So I found a community within what I had. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, it's so important to have community, especially when you're so far away from home. And I'm glad that you were able to find the community. But I just imagine with your husband being back and forth and you being in school and that's your sole focus and dealing with pregnancy, it was kind of hard to navigate all of that. So
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about your experience just being pregnant, like the pregnancy. How was your pregnancy? Or was it a good pregnancy? Did you have any complications? How was the pregnancy? And then how was that also with you managing school? Because girl, I'm just like, how she do it?
I'm still trying to figure out how I did it as as well. But so I found out that I was pregnant last year 2024 around May.
Okay.
And I was going into, like I said, my last year of pharmacy school. So as soon as I found out that I was pregnant, me and my husband sat down to try to discuss what the year would kind of look like for us leading up to me delivering and even afterwards. I do remember when I first found out, I went and I told, so the last year of pharmacy school, let me back up a little bit. The last
Mhm.
year of pharmacy school is not in the classroom. At
Okay.
that point, we have matured to actually going to pharmacy sites and getting real world experience our complete last year. So I already at that time had my schedule of the different rotation sites that I was supposed to go to. I didn't know that during the time I was going to be delivering, I knew that I did not want to be on a rotation or have one that was not as demanding. So I first went to the school and to the director of these rotation programs. And I sat down with her and I discussed with her that I was pregnant and that I needed her help to try to switch around my schedule as much as possible. And she did everything in her power to try to push the more challenging and demanding rotations at the forefront and kind of schedule me for more remote positions towards the end of my pregnancy and
Okay.
after delivery so I can be able to graduate on time because I was very adamant. I was telling her, I was like, please, is there anything that I could do to graduate on time? And she was like, of course, if it's in my power, I'm going to do everything in my power to have you graduate on time. And that's exactly what she did.
I love that. I love how they were accommodating to you, but I
Yeah.
also love how you were proactive because sometimes people can kind of just be like, I'm going to just suffer through this and I'm not going to share it with anybody, just deal with it and just do what I'm slated to do. But I like how you reached out and was, active in trying to find accommodations for yourself.
Right.
So I love that. I love that. Okay, keep going.
Okay. So she made my schedule out to, like I said, to be what it was.
Mhm.
As far as my husband, he was going back and forth to Detroit. So basically, as soon as I had that first doctor's office appointment, I tried to schedule my appointments on specific days that I knew that my husband's workload was either very light or like either a Friday or a Monday, so where he could, be there the whole weekend for me, and that's what we did. So all of my appointments throughout my pregnancy were either on Fridays or Mondays to accommodate his schedule so he can, make sure that he was there to be able to support me because this was our first child.
Mhm.
And, he wanted to experience everything alongside with me and without me having family or friends that could be there with me. He wanted to be supportive in any way that he possibly could. So that's what we did. And throughout my pregnancy, I feel like I really had a beautiful pregnancy. Now, of course, I had the morning sickness and I did have the headaches, the sore boobs, really like, all the little pregnancy symptoms, but any type of major complications. I did not. I did have a little bleeding throughout my pregnancy. That was a bit of a scare. I was actually on a rotation during this time, and I went to the bathroom, and it was just, I was so shocked because I saw all
Mm.
this blood everywhere. And I remember telling my instructor, I was like, okay, I have to go to the hospital. And they were like, they were so accommodating. They were like, oh, please go, relax. We you could do work later, you could make it up. It's best that you take care of yourself and your child. So I rushed to the hospital, and I know during that time my husband was actually in Detroit, and he dropped everything that he was doing at work and came straight from Detroit all the way to DC at a drop of a dime to come accompany me to the hospital. Luckily, everything was a-okay with the baby. They ran some tests at the hospital. They did an ultrasound. Everything was fine. It was just, a slight scare. And but other than that, I had a beautiful pregnancy. Besides going to school, my husband really took care of everything. He was very supportive of me the whole time I was in school. And I think that really made the experience for me that much more comforting.
Yes, you are a blessed lady to have a husband that supports you so well. So many women, they may have a husband, he may not be as supportive as the one that you
Right.
have. So you definitely kiss him and tell him that he is amazing because he is. So tell me a little bit about your delivery. So when you got to the hospital and everything, how was that process of you getting there? Was he there with you when you went into labor? Did you go into spontaneous labor? Talk a little bit more about that for me.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So, when I gave birth in January, and it was during like the holiday season. So he was off of work during that time. Thank God. So, he was at that time mostly in DC with me. Actually, when I delivered, I did not go into the hospital thinking that I was going to deliver. I would actually went into the hospital for another reason. It ended up getting induced. So towards the end of my pregnancy, I had excruciating pelvic pain.
Oh.
And I actually went to this specific day that I was admitted to the hospital. I actually had a doctor's office appointment with my OBGYN, and I mentioned to her how excruciating the pelvic pain was. And she was like, that's normal to have. I was 38 weeks at this time. She was
Okay.
like, we can't really induce you. There's no medical reason to induce you. You're healthy. You don't have any gestational diabetes. You don't have preeclampsia. It's no reason to really induce you. They did say towards the end of my pregnancy that the baby measured to be very big. Um, that necessarily wasn't the case during after he came out. But they said that he was measuring very big, and that could be, contributing to the pelvic pain that I was having. Um so I left the doctor's office feeling a little bit disappointed because I kind of felt like it was not normal.
Mhm.
And it was not. Towards the end of the day, the doctor's appointment was in the morning time. Towards the end of the day, it had gotten so bad to I couldn't get out of bed, and my husband had to carry me. If I had to use the restroom, he had to carry me from the bed to the restroom. I could not walk. That's how excruciating the pain was. And I remember calling my mom and telling her, and she was like, Mallory, that's not normal. I think you should
Right.
go to the hospital. And I was like, "Oh, mom, I don't want to go to the hospital." And they all they do is just turn me around. They already told me they weren't going to induce me. They already told me that it was fine. She was like, "I think that you need to go." So me and my husband grabbed the hospital bag. We weren't expecting to stay, but we just wanted to bring it just in case. Um, and we just went to the hospital for that, pelvic pain. When I arrived to the hospital, um, the physicians there, they did say, hey, the pelvic pain seems normal. We don't see any reason to induce you. You're only 38 weeks. We kind of recommend to do induction at 39 weeks if you want to do it voluntarily. And I was like, I can't do this. And I don't know if because they told me no, my blood pressure rose in the hospital, but it rose high enough for them to say, okay, you may have a high blood pressure and we need to get this baby out of you. So they said, okay, now we have a medical reason to induce you since your blood pressure is so high. And I was like, okay. I was like, now, mind you, my blood pressure wasn't high my whole pregnancy, but now all of that today. So I don't know if it, hopefully they weren't lying, but if they were, I'm so glad because they put me out of my misery. So they
Yeah.
ended up asking me, would I like to be induced? And I was like, yes, please. So that's what we did. I went, like I said, went to the hospital for pelvic pain, walked out with a baby. So they induced me, and it was at this time, I would say probably 11 p.m. on like a Friday. And I was in labor for 30 hours. I was not progressing like I should. They did the balloon, they did other procedures to try to help me, be able to, start contractions and getting ready to push, but I was not progressing like I should. Um, and they came in and they told me, hey, we may need to think about doing a C-section. And I was adamant that I did not want a C-section. I was like, listen, I don't, whatever we have to do, let's try that first because I don't want to have a C-section. I want a C-section to be the last resort for me.
Right.
So they were like, okay, well, the baby's heart rate is becoming getting in jeopardy of, you probably may need a C-section. I was like, yes, but I would like to try to push. So the doctor there, mind you, I had to use the doctor on call because my OBGYN did not go. So I used the doctor on call, and he was like, okay, well, we'll give it a try. We'll try for you to push. So they tried. We did the countdown, the 10, 9, 8, the all the way down to 1, and we did it 3 times. Um in that, I guess, that first round, I guess you would say. And the baby did not budge. So they got a little bit discouraged, but I asked them if they will try again. So we did it again, another round of the 3, 10, 9, 8, counting down. Then the baby did start to come down, but then went back up. And I feel like I really had to learn how to push or
Mm.
listen to my body of how to push because they were telling me, and since I did not know how to push because this is my first time, I had to figure it out. And once I figured it out on the third round of pushing, right before the third round, he was like, Mallorie, I think that and I was like, no. I said, no, I don't want a C-section. I said, please. So I got in my zone then when they kept when they said, okay, like, this is maybe it with the pushing. We may need to try other measures. I was like, no. So I got in the zone. So I was like, listen, I said, hey, can y'all dim the lights? I said, I asked my husband, I said, can you get my ice water over there and hold it up to my mouth? I was so hot at this point pushing. It was like a marathon that I was running. It was so hard to push for me. I asked the nurse to get me a cold rag to put on my head. And I just remember just focusing and just breathing and just trying to trust my body to do what it needed to do. And that third round was a charm. The baby was able to be, pushed out at that point. And I was so relieved, so relieved at that point that I was able to do it.
Girl, you have said so much good stuff, and I have some questions that I want to ask you.
Okay.
So, going back, when you got to the hospital and they told you ultimately, like, yeah, we're going to induce you, what was your thoughts on induction at that point? Like, I know you had said you kind of wanted a spontaneous birth, right? And
Right.
but
Yes.
you had the pelvic pain. So what were your thoughts on the induction, and then for it to last 30 hours, like what was your thinking during that time? Because 30 hours is really, really long. So
Yes.
during that process with them trying different things, was there any time that you got discouraged? Like, how was that induction and then your mindset during it?
Well, I so many times I feel like throughout my delivery process, labor and delivery, I feel like I really had to change my mind on a lot of things. I remember just going into um, birth or labor. I was so afraid to give birth.
Mhm.
I had heard so many horror stories and traumatic experience. I was so afraid. I remember looking at my husband before they induced me, and I told him, I was like, I don't think I can do this. And he was like, Mallory, yes, you can. And I was like, no, I'm so serious. And I meant it. Like, I just felt like that was the first time in my life I really felt like I could not do something. I really did. And I was like, I was trying to wrap my head around how I'm going to be able to do this. How am I going to able to get, I also have a fear of needles, I know. But I was like, how am I going to be able to get over this fear of needles? They're drawing blood, they're sticking me, they're putting IV in my arm. That then I wanted an epidural as well too. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. I don't know how I'm going to be able to push this baby out. And I've heard all these horror stories and people saying how painful and how, traumatic this is. And so I really, at that point, when they told me about induction, I was thinking about the pelvic plane too. And I was like, listen, I'm, I'm ready to get this baby.
Mhm.
I was like, Mallory, you would really have to change your mindset. You have to do whatever you have to do. Kind of like my mom used to use this saying, in the South, we have this saying, like, you got to put on your big girl draws. And
Mhm.
I remember my mom just saying that from throughout my childhood or throughout my adulthood. Now you got to put on your big girl draws. So I really did. I was like, okay, Mallory, you got to get your mind wrapped around what you have to do, because that's the only way that you could get through it. Because it's not, you can't, there's no other choice but to get through it.
Right, right, right.
So I was like, okay, it was scary to hear induction, but I was ready. I had made up in my mind, okay, I'm going to do this. They wheeled me back to the room, and thank God, I don't know if it was just because it was the middle of the night. I remember the anesthesiologist coming by, and they were like, hi, we don't have anyone that we're, administering anesthesia to at this moment. So if you want an epidural right now, we could go ahead and this was before I started contractions, or they giving me the medicine to induce me. So I was like, okay. Well, I already knew at that point, going into the hospital, I did want an epidural. So I said, okay, let's go ahead and do the epidural. I was nervous about the epidural, but the doctor explained it to me. He explained to me what exactly he was about to do, what I would feel. They were very gentle and they took very good care of me. And so the epidural was a breeze, and it took really well. I didn't feel anything. So once they gave me the medicine to induce me, I never even felt contraction. And so I don't even know what those even feel like because uh, I was given the anesthesia before any of that took place. So I think that was one of my saving graces, because that helped me be able to be calm and relax a little bit about all the medical procedures that they were performing, like the cervical checks. I know I got one of those prior to them administering the epidural, and it was so painful, especially with that pelvic pain. So once they were able to give me the epidural, I didn't feel those as much anymore. I didn't feel the pelvic pain anymore. I was able to calm down, relax, and be able to take in the experience that I was about to take in. Um, I was a little bit worried about me not being able to, when they kept on saying that I was not progressing as I should. So I was worried about that because they kept on, like I said, stressing that if I was not, I would need a C-section, and I did not want one. So I just kind of just remained calm. I prayed. I leaned on husband. At that time, my mom was in the process of flying from Georgia to DC to come, and I knew that once she got there, she would be a big support as well for me. So I just tried to ride out those 30 hours as, as calm as possible as I could. And it was very difficult because I could not eat. And so, I was there for, in that moment, that headspace for a long time. And I just had to be there. Yeah.
You have to be so resilient to be able to endure labor, especially in a hospital setting, because like you say, they withhold food from you. You get ice
Yeah.
chips and maybe some liquids. So I'm glad that you have a very positive mindset, and that really propelled you forward. And then you kind of headstrong too, because sometimes when women hear, well, you're not progressing, they get in their mind that defeat mentality, and it kind of trickles over, and they're like, yeah, well, maybe I can't do that. But I'm so happy, and I love how you said, you heard that, you prayed, you leaned on your husband, and you did what you needed to do to ultimately birth your baby. So
Right.
let's talk a little bit about postpartum for you. So
Okay.
how was postpartum, the recovery, even with you pushing? So let's start there. So from you pushing your baby out, did you have any tears or anything? That's one of the biggest questions women want to know. Well, did you tear? Especially you not being able to necessarily have that mind body connection with the pushing. And it took you some time to readjust and kind of gather yourself. So how was, did you have any tearing, and how was your postpartum stay at the hospital, and how was that transition over to going home?
Okay. So I know I did not have any tearing at all.
Good,
Like I said, the doctor that delivered my baby, he was so wonderful. I really
good.
wish that he was my OBGYN, because he was so wonderful. And even though he wanted or was suggesting for me to have that C-section, he listened to me. I feel like he really listened to me and really tried to give me the experience that I wanted to have. So I really enjoyed that. The nurses, I mean, wonderful. I mean, really, my birth experience was all of the trauma stories that I heard, or traumatic, things that have happened to women in my family, friends, things like that. That was not my experience at all. And um I just remember being like, wow, like, is this what they were talking about? It can't be, because I had a great experience. I had a great experience. And like I said, no tearing. The hospital staff was wonderful. After I delivered, of course, they kind of kept me in the delivery room for a minute, until they were ready to move me over to mother and baby section. So but the nurse who took, I mean, I really wish that I would have gotten her name, because she took so great care of me. I thanked her over and over and over again. I have never been a patient of the hospital prior to delivering. So having someone else outside of, my family take care of me and take such good care of me, especially in such a vulnerable state that I was in,
Right.
I was so appreciative. You know what I mean? I've never had someone clean me up, or, really, like, really see me in a vulnerable state, and not treat me any type of
Mhm.
different way. I kept on saying, I'm so sorry. And she was like, no, she was like, I'm here to help you, you
Right.
know. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I just feel so embarrassed. And she was like, it's nothing to feel embarrassed about. And she just made me feel so comforted. So that experience was great. They after, like I said, after I cleaned up in that the room I delivered in, they moved me over to mother and baby. And when I was over there, it was like night and day. I mean, the nurses weren't bad. They weren't as comforting as the ones that I had in labor and delivery, but they weren't bad. They were, they still were very attentive to my needs. But Yeah, that the overall hospital stay was a decent hospital stay. I really don't have really that many complaints at all. Um Now when I got home, that's a different story.
Mhm.
When I got home, it's like, all of this bliss that I've had at the hospital with this new baby, and then you come home and it's like, what do you do now? You're home, brought your baby home. Now real life starts, you know what I mean? And I just remember coming home. And when I did come home, I did have a friend of mine bring me and my husband something to eat. We got discharged at the hospital around 6 or 7 that evening. Um, and she was like, Mallorie, I cooked you something to brought y'all something to eat. And she did. She brought pans, I mean, of collard greens and ribs and macaroni and cheese and salad and drinks. I mean, she really had the whole spread laid out. And to be honest with you, I didn't even think in my head when we got discharged from the hospital, what are we going to eat that night? I didn't
Mhm.
even think about it until we got home. But she had already, had that figured out for me. And that was just such a blessing, that me and my husband were able to eat off of that for a couple of days, and we didn't have to figure out something, to eat or anything. So that was just a blessing for us to have that to come home to. I do remember the next day, um, my husband had to move out of his we had a separate apartment in Detroit as well that he would go back and forth to. And he had to move out of that apartment. And he was like, Mallorie, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to move out of the apartment. And I was like, no, I said, I can't be left here with the baby by myself. And he was like, okay, well, let's, try to get you some help. Let's call either our parents. My mother could not come because she couldn't get off of work at the time, but his mother ended up coming. So she flew the next day to come to DC to help me out while my husband had to go move out of the apartment in Detroit and then come back to DC. So I do remember that first week just being so sad and not knowing why. I was so sad that first week. And I don't know if it was just emotions, shock, the shock factor of being a new mom had, wore off. And now I'm just, here. But it really hit me when I was home and the hospital staff wasn't there to help. My husband was away. I mean, his mom was there, but I still would have preferred the comfort of my own mother being there. And she couldn't be there, and I was just faced with reality. Like, hey, you are a new mom. I'm a new mom, and not sure what to do. Um so I just remember that first week just being so sad. And my husband was only gone for a day to move out of the apartment in Detroit. um but when he came back, I just remember telling him, I was like, hey, I'm so sad. you know um I don't know why. I don't know what to do about it. And he asked me, he was like, well, Mallorie, would you like me to get you some help? Would you like to talk to someone? Would you like for me to, go take you to counseling? He was very still, supportive of anything that I needed at that time. And even if it was just him just being there, he would try his best to be there. Of course, he still had to work and things like that. But, just him just sitting there with me or helping me out, he really did try his very best. But it was very difficult for me because, like I said, I just had these range of emotions and I didn't know what to do with them.
So, with those emotions and everything, what did you ultimately decide? Did you allow it to pass? Did you seek some type of professional help? Did it turn into postpartum depression or was it just baby blues? Can you
Mhm.
tell me some more?
Yes. I believe it was just baby blues. I know that when you first have a baby, you have like a doctor's appointment, for the baby as soon, like maybe like within the first week or whatever. And I do remember at my child's pediatrician's office, they had a questionnaire for mothers to fill out about, how they were feeling. And I even went to my own doctor at at my 6 weeks checkup, and they even had like a form or a survey for me to fill out. And um I was not diagnosed with postpartum depression, but my doctor told me I was borderline. And she asked me, if I wanted help, if I want to, seek therapy, or any type of way that she can accommodate me. And I told her that at the time I was not, ready for it, so I did decline. But I do feel like I said, it was just baby blues. They did end up passing relatively quickly, especially once I got more help. That's when we hired she's was a postpartum doula, and
Okay.
also night nanny for me.
All right. So postpartum doula,
Mm.
girl, that is amazing. They are amazing in what they do to help. Did you have a doula just during the nighttime, or did you have one that was with you during the day? Like, what hours did she work, and what type of assistance did she offer to you and your family?
Right. So let me start by saying the postpartum doula was something that I was thinking about even before I delivered. We did not go forward with it until afterwards, but it was still in the back of my mind. And
Right.
how I found out about postpartum doulas was through social media on TikTok. Um, Prior to that, I had never heard of a postpartum doula or a doula. I did not have anyone that I knew that utilized those services at all, and so I was totally new to it. And I actually looked up and I found a black owned doula agency in the DMV area, and I contacted them, and they were, I mean, the owner, she was so helpful. She was very helpful, very professional, um, very informative of doula work and pregnancy and labor and delivery and postpartum. And she had an excellent staff. She told me whenever I was ready, to move forward with it, just let them know, and they will offer me any type of service that I needed, whether that be daytime, nighttime, during delivery, in anything like that. So I already had that in the back of my mind um, when I delivered. And so when after that first week, like I said, coming home, I was like, okay, I told my husband I would like to, move forward with this. And we ended up moving forward with a postpartum doula. She worked an overnight shift for me. She will come 3 days out of the week of my choosing. And she provided services from about 8 p.m. to about 7 a.m. the next morning.
Okay. All
And
right.
she provided um, any type of service that would help me and baby. So she would put the baby to sleep. She would feed the baby. She would hold the baby while I would try to cook dinner. They offered for her to watch the baby while if me and my husband wanted to leave the house and go on
Mhm,
a date or grab something
mhm,
to eat and
mhm.
or just get out. She offered to wash the baby's bottles, wash the baby's clothes, bathe the baby. Um, Anything that I needed help with or assistance with, even if it was, I was breastfeeding, I breastfed my baby, giving me tips for breastfeeding. And just, I mean, she was just helpful in every facet. I mean, it was like a new mother's dream for real, especially with me being a first time mom and not knowing any of these things. She was so experienced and so knowledgeable about doula work, and like I said about postpartum. she helped me greatly, I don't really think that I would have maintained my sanity if it wasn't for her. Just for her to take the load off while I got some sleep. It was so, I mean, just I remember when as soon as she walked through the door, she went straight to work. I was able to take a shower, and just being able to take a shower felt like amazing. Like something that, you usually would take for granted before you have a baby.
Mhm.
Just being able to take a shower and take care of myself and groom myself and be able to get a full night's sleep. It just felt like I was renewed. And I really needed that postpartum.
I'm sure that played a huge role in your mental health also during that time, is having someone to kind of take the load off for you. Now,
Mhm.
I have a question pertaining to you just getting back to your normal self or trying to get some sense of normalcy. So, after the postpartum doula stopped being with you, how was that transition over to just you and baby and your husband without having that extra support?
Um, it was by that time I was so refreshed and renewed. It wasn't that hard of a transition. She was with us for about 3 months.
Okay.
And within those 3 months I was able to, create a routine. I was able to know what to expect. At that point, I was able to, like I said, I had her help to be able to feel renewed again, so I can be able to, pour back into this new baby and in my family. And so it was such a smooth transition. But I was sad to see her go. I really was. I was sad to see her go because
No.
it was like, this person coming over weekly for 3 months, they would start to become a part of the family at that point. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
um, I was sad to see her go, but she prepared me. I really felt so empowered at that point, um, to be a great mother, and continue on without her. Yeah.
What advice do you have for a mama that may not have the access to a postpartum doula?
Mhm.
What advice do you have for her to try to get back to some sense of normalcy,
Mhm.
especially after birthing a baby, being in labor for a long amount of time, just trying to regain some sense of herself?
Right. I do know that, postpartum doulas are not, affordable or accessible to everyone. So I do suggest even before you deliver, try to work out some details of how after like postpartum will look for you and your family. Lean on any type of support that you have. I know that there's mothers and grandmas and aunties and friends who are more than happy to, be able to assist you after, you give birth.
Right.
And that just wasn't the case for me because I was so far from my family.
Right.
But lean on a support system, be able to, what helped me a lot was also doing the things that I used to do before I, had a baby, which was, getting my hair done, getting my nails done, little things that you think aren't going to do anything or make a difference, they really do. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It made me feel like myself again, even hanging out with friends. And if you can't hang out, inviting your friends over. I invited, that same friend that brought me the dinner when I came home from the hospital. I invited her over. She came over. I couldn't drink because I was, like I said, I was breastfeeding, but she had her a glass of wine. She brought me some sparkling, sparkling drink, and I drunk that as if I was drinking wine. And we just laughed and talked, and just even having people over just to make you feel good, even if it's for a hour or two, something to renew yourself and to renew your spirit. You really need that because you can't pour from an empty cup. And
Yeah.
I feel like your newborn baby needs a whole mom. They need a mom that can pour into them, but you can't pour into anyone else until you pour into yourself.
Yes, that is so important. Prioritizing your self care because everything starts with the mom. In order for you to be able to run your household efficiently, your well being and your self care matters. And like you said, even being able to be there for your baby is so important for you to be whole and well within yourself in order to show up for your family in the way that you need to. Mallory, I am so happy to have spoken with you.
Thank you.
What lasting advice do you have for women, just in general? Just a piece of advice that you have. It doesn't have to pertain to pregnancy or postpartum or anything like that, but just something that you want the listeners to take away from this interview.
Yes. I'm gonna put a little bit of mom advice and a little bit of just everyday advice, and that really is to believe in yourself. You have a purpose. You are destined to do certain things, and you have to really believe in that. And
Yeah,
I think that is what empowered me so much when I was through my pregnancy journey and then also giving birth, is knowing and actually believing in myself that I can do something. I would say also not to hone into other people's experience so much. Yes, you can take other people's experience and try your best to try your best to I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm
that's okay.
sorry.
That's all
Try to
right.
take other people's experience and but take it with a grain of salt. You understand? Like, know that your experience may not be their experience, and
Mhm.
vice versa. To know that every birth is not traumatic. Every pregnancy journey is not traumatic. Every postpartum journey is not traumatic and challenging. Now it does have its own set of challenges, but it does not have to beat you down. It doesn't have to
Right.
get the best of you. I would say also make sure you advocate for yourself. If you don't like something or you don't want something, make sure you speak up and feel confident in yourself. Do your research. I know for me, doing my research beforehand helped me so much to feel confident enough to speak up. And I think that if more women, they feel so intimidated in that healthcare space, especially if they are not a healthcare professional like myself.
Right.
But if they do their research, if they, talk to people, ask questions as well, be knowledgeable, or try your best to be as knowledgeable as possible on everything, because it makes you feel confident in advocating for yourself.
Yeah. Great advice that you've given. Very good advice. I couldn't have said that better. So, do you have any social media handles or anything that you would like to share for people to be able to connect with you?
Yes, yes. So, on all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook and YouTube is Papa Mally. Is POPAMALLIE. I'm also, like I told you, an entrepreneur. So I own a bakery business. So if you're in the metro, I know if you're in the metro Detroit area and you're interested in getting a custom cake, I also specialize in wedding cakes as well. My Instagram for that is Caked by M. So CAKED by BYNM. Yeah. And also you can visit
Girl,
us online at www.cakebym.com.
I will post all of that in the description because you are amazing. A
Thank you.
pharmacist, a baker, a mom, a wife, a
Yeah.
daughter. Lord, you are so much. I am so glad to have had the opportunity to speak with you, and I'm thankful for you taking the time to share your story to help another mama out there. So, if today's episode spoke to you, please take a moment to share it with another mama who just may need to hear it. Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. This is Candace Jackson reminding you that your voice and your story matter. So until next time, be well, mama.